Hi everyone, Nirthya here, and I'm really glad to have Estelle along with us to talk about window of tolerance. But before we go ahead and discuss anything further, I just want Estelle to give a quick introduction about herself, and then we'll go ahead with the discussion. Estelle, can you?
Yeah. Hi, Nirthya, and everyone watching. I'm Estelle Franklin. I'm a consultant psychotherapist at Pulse of Perspective. I'm also a well-being coach. I have dual roles, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me, Nirthya.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and agreeing to discuss on this topic. Right. Okay. When we were actually discussing about talking this topic, the first question was, what is window of tolerance? Because window is different term, tolerance is different term. So
Yeah.
let us just start off by talking about, or me asking you, what is window of tolerance?
Okay, so window of tolerance, it was developed by Dan Siegel. He's a clinical professor of psychiatry. And the window of tolerance basically describes the best state of arousal or stimulation in which we human beings or individuals are able to function and thrive in everyday life.
Okay. Okay. Got it. So it's more like a state wherein we are more resilient, where we can function to our
Correct,
optimum levels, right?
correct.
Okay, great. Fine. Okay, so since we are talking about daily life, do you think there are any specific triggers in our daily life that can push us out from this window of tolerance?
Yes, absolutely. So the thing with window of tolerance, I know you said the window is different, tolerance is different.
Right.
What we call it the window of tolerance is because if you have to imagine a window, okay, just a window, any window, and everything in between. It's the window of tolerance is usually explained by a graph, right? There's a picture, and then there's a graph and curves on the graph. So when you look at everything that happens within that window,
Mhm.
the graph moving up and down or the curves moving up and down, it shows that you are within your window. But when you move out of your window,
Mhm.
now moving out of your window is caused by due to stress triggers, and these could be anything, right? And it doesn't have to be limited to something. So when you push out of your window, your body gets into a state of hypo arousal and hyper arousal. So when you get hyper aroused,
Mhm.
there are different kinds of responses. uh, you may have heard of the fight or flight
Right.
response, right? And that is when you are hyper aroused, there's a fight or flight response where you're pushing or you're pulling back, right? You're either fighting it or you're moving away from it. And a few of the responses, common responses of hyper arousal state or zone, or examples of fight or flight responses are anxiety,
Right.
aggression,
Right.
emotional outbursts. It could be also anything impulsivity,
Mhm.
right? Overeating, binge eating, addictions, and these outbursts can be aggressive, can be emotional. But when you move out of your window and you become your body or you become hypo aroused, that
Mhm.
time there's a freeze response.
Okay.
So in a freeze response, what happens? Classic responses of freeze response are feeling numb, of
Mhm.
feelings of dissociation, not being able to connect, uh, you know, disassociating from yourself, from others, from your feelings.
Right.
So another classic example would be depression, right? The body tends to shut down in a freeze response. So those are a few examples of the different states. So there's hyperarousal when you
Right.
move above the window, hypo when you move below.
Below the window.
And staying within the window is when you are able to function with the stress. So it's not like no one has stress, even very small things, right? Like a boss shouting at his
Mhm.
employee. The employee might face stress
Mhm.
and might have different reactions or responses to what the boss had spoken to the employee. So
Right.
if the boss scolded the employee or yelled at the employee, that is a little stress for the employee, right? Because that could be something that the employee is not used to,
Hmm.
and that stress sometimes can push the individual out of their window,
Right.
right? Either they fight towards it, they flight, or they freeze.
Yes.
right? And there might be a lot of examples, but this is another example of just how stress creeps in and how you can be pushed out of your window. The same thing, even if with animals, a lot of people have a lot of different phobias. Some people, look at lizards or
Right.
cockroaches and just run.
Yes.
Some people, like me, when I look at a cat, I freeze. I notice what parts of my body seem to go into this freeze mode, right? Where I'm shutting down, I'm not able to do anything, even though I know, okay, I'm scared of this animal, right? So those are a few responses. And possible triggers could be anything, right? And it may differ from person to person.
Yes.
A lot of times, what might trigger me may not, trigger you. And these triggers tend to push us out of a window where we move into, a state of hyper arousal or hypo. Yeah.
Got it. Nice. Like that was very beautifully explained. As in, like these triggers need not be any specific triggers, like situation based, but in general, it can be anything. Starting from hypoarousal to hyperarousal, it can be anything. Anything can lead you to a state wherein you have to get over or like kind of pushed out from the window of tolerance.
Yes.
And the classic example that you mentioned, stress, I think that is like a common trigger or possibly a common situation where everyone can experience how they are pushed out of their comfort zone or how they are pushed out of their window of tolerance.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Since we spoke a lot about how we are in a state of fight or flight or in a state of freeze. Okay, so when we either in that state or this state, how do we get ourselves back to the place wherein we are able to ground ourselves?
Correct. So when you say ground yourself, you mean getting back into the window,
Yes,
like moving back into the window.
right.
So a lot of things can help, right? A lot of things like maybe mindfulness exercises, right? Like just practicing mindfulness. And this could be done due to various ways in which we can practice mindfulness, right? To stay in the here and now, you could try grounding techniques. There's something called the 5 4 3 2 1 grounding technique, right? Where you look for 5 things around you, and sometimes you can limit this to what you look at around. You can look at something in a lot of times I tell my clients, if they're able to easily just look at 5 things around them and they still don't feel grounded, I say look at 5 things with the color red around you, or I choose a different color, or I try to limit what they're looking at so that there's not too much of stimuli around, right? And 5 things around you that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. So this is one of the techniques which can be practiced to get back into the state, to get back within your window, where you have optimal arousal, where you're not pushed either of the extreme, right? Shutting down or fighting or pulling back. So you could do that. Deep breathing also helps. Diaphragmatic breathing helps. And grounding in a way to soothe your senses. So if you feel like, maybe looking for things around is too much and that again is pushing you out of your window, you can look for what kind of grounding helps you. It doesn't have to be all the 5 senses that you're engaging in or all the 5 grounding techniques. You could just, stay with touch, right? Look at what your feet feel like on the floor, or, notice what your back feels like if you're resting on a chair, or what your butt feels like sitting on a chair or a sofa, or what does it feel like if you notice your eyelashes touching, or if you notice your palms touching your knees. A few of these things as well. Sometimes journaling also helps, but that again can trigger and make the person or the individual realize that they're not able to stay within their window. So just practicing grounding through mindfulness, breathing, any kind of techniques that they notice that is bringing them back to the present moment. Right. Noticing how they can stay with the breath, or notice what their body feels like when they drink water, or notice. Sometimes having a shower also helps. Right? A lot of people talk about having hot showers and how that helps and how that calms the person or brings them back into the window. So a lot of practices to stay grounded, and mindfulness, I think, is one of the basic ways in which we can just come back to the moment, to the
Yeah.
here and now. And this could be done through various practices, mindful eating, mindful walking, a lot of things, and this can be different for everyone. So
Right.
as long as you know what is bringing you back, you can choose that as an anchor. Anchors are something that we talk a lot about during, window of tolerance, because an anchor, like it does to the ship, holds it and doesn't allow it to just move away.
Right. Right.
An anchor can be something that brings you back into the present moment, and that really helps. So it will be great if we could practice staying within our window to look at what anchors we have around us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And based on what you have explained about mindfulness and grounding ourselves, I think it's a lot about finding that anchor within yourself, like an inward anchor. When you spoke about just focusing on your breath or just observing how you feel when you're sitting on a chair, and
Yeah.
also things surrounding yourself. So the anchor is somewhere created in surrounding us or within ourselves, and probably that will help us to ground ourselves.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Great. Nice. Okay. Since we were talking about the present moment and how we have this shift away from window of tolerance, I had a question here. So, do you think is there any specific time for us to develop the state of window of tolerance, or it just happens?
So the window of tolerance is, I think it's there throughout. Even children experience, moving out of the window. And what usually happens is we're not aware. A lot of people are not aware of this term because it's only learned as, trauma or anxiety responses.
Right.
But if and this really helps with body work to understand what is going on with the individual. So if you say when was it, when does it start developing, I think it's there throughout, but the awareness of what is the window of tolerance or when am I moving out
Mhm.
of my window gives the person more language to understand, okay, this is what is happening with me, and okay, this is how I can come back to a state of grounding. So I think it's there throughout. It's just that the awareness is
Yes.
something, if you're aware, we know it's present.
Yes, yes,
Right?
right,
Yeah.
right. Makes sense. And as you mentioned, like most of us, of course, would not be knowing what is this term window of tolerance is. And I'm really glad we brought up this topic, and I'm really happy that you are talking about it.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. And one last question for
Yeah.
today's video. Why do you think it is important for us to be within the window of tolerance? Because, like, as you mentioned, there are many situations in our daily life which will obviously push us out of our window of tolerance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why you think it is important for us to stay within that window?
So imagine if, there was so much of stress we were going through, and we all go through a lot of stress as psychologists, as therapists, as individuals, the different roles that we play in our life, we go through so much of stress. And if we are constantly in that window, in that phase of just, receiving so much of stress, what would happen eventually, right? Either yeah, you tell me what would happen if there's constant stress, right?
We'll just, yeah. Yeah, no, I was saying like we'll just burst out at some moment, or we'll feel exhausted, we'll have burnouts. There's so
Yeah,
many
yeah,
things that can
yeah,
happen. Right.
absolutely. And so even those are responses of us moving out of our window, right? And
Yeah.
we are constantly in stress, constantly pushed out of our window. We won't be able to stay in that optimal arousal zone, right? Where we are able to function even if stress is present.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important to look at it. I'm not saying it's that we shouldn't go out of our window. That's not something that's within our control. But what's within our control is how we can come back to a state of anchoring ourselves or grounding ourselves. And so it's important to stay within the window so that we can, function in a way that is best for us in that moment, that optimal arousal zone that we talk about. And it's okay if we are pushed out of our window, but I think just bringing ourselves back, bringing that awareness into the picture is important to look at how we can come back to the window. So staying in the window will not only help us with our
Mm-hmm.
day-to-day work or any stress that comes up, but it'll help us build more resilience,
Right.
right? Because we're going to keep practicing these grounding techniques, these anchoring practices or mindfulness practices to stay within the window. And so when we know that, okay, while we practice this, we are able to, stay within the window, able to stay calm, cool, able to stay connected with one another or stay collected in a very composed way.
Right.
We know we are able to identify what has worked for us, what kind of a grounding technique, or what were the thoughts that help us to, counter back into just being grounded. So we know, okay, that worked for us, that will help us be more resilient because we're going to practice what we recall, what we saw working for us, right? So that's why I think it's important to know how to stay within the window. Yeah.
Nice. So like it's really beautiful to be aware of um, our arousal states, like wherein
Yeah.
when we are pushed away, how can we get back to the state? And also, I also liked it when you explained that it's not that we are completely um, going away from the stress, but it's like you are being there in the stress, but you're able to cope up from it. You're able to be more resilient, managing the stress at the same time being or showing your highest potential in that specific situation. That's really nice. And it's really good that we were able to understand this new term. As I have been telling since starting, not many of us really know that window of tolerance is a term and it exists. So I'm really glad that we were able to talk about it and we were able to have a very brief understanding about what window of tolerance is and how can we get back to the window, and also how can we practice it
Yeah.
to be more resilient in our day-to-day
Yeah.
situations.
Yeah.
That was really amazing. So Estelle, before I end our conversation, is there anything that you would like to add?
Um, just that, for the ones who notice or feel like, they're constantly going out of the window, it does not mean that they're weak or does not mean that they're not resilient.
Mhm.
But if you become aware and you know that, okay, you're noticing sensations in your body because it's also biology, right? It's also the way
Right.
our nervous system functions as well, right? So if you notice that you are being pushed or you are pushed out of your window, immediately what you could do to just get yourself back to the windows, just to acknowledge what's going on, what's happening,
Mhm.
and look at ways in which that will work for you to come back to the window. So it's okay if we move out of our window. And how will we know we are moving out of our window is by noticing any sensations that, in our body or the way we are reacting, responding,
Mhm.
right? If, there's a lot of overwhelm or there's too much of anxiety, right? Anxiety, am I sweating too much? Am I breathing too hard? Or do you feel like not waking up from bed? Do you feel like just staying in bed all day? Just noticing this will help you understand that, okay, I'm moving within my window. Moving out of my window,
Right.
and look at ways in which I can come back to my window. And if you're still, finding it difficult, you know that you can always reach out to therapists around, reach out and look at whatever resources are available. So that's about it, Nitya.
Thank you, Estelle. Thank you so much for sharing this knowledge with us and also encouraging us to be aware of the sensations going in our body and also helping us to understand how grounding will help us to get back to a state. Right. So thank you so much, Estelle. Thank you for your time and thank you for this video and as well as the topic. Yeah, guys, thank you everyone for watching this
Thank
video.
you.
Yeah, bye, guys. Bye, everyone. Bye, Estelle.
Bye. Thank you. Bye bye.